You know, my dear. They whispered, didn't they? Whispered like cowards do when they think the lions left the jungle. Where did they go? They muttered with false concern, wrapped in glee, assuming your silence was surrender, that your absence meant decay. They painted you as lost, as broken, as forgotten. But what they didn't know, what they never wanted to know, was that you weren't vanishing, you were evolving. You weren't ghosting reality, you were dissecting it. They measured your worth in appearances, in posts, in noise. But you were becoming the storm in the silence. You were building rage into poetry, turning scars into scripture, and scripting your comeback in the language of vengeance. They assumed you flatlined because your footsteps didn't echo down their hallways anymore. But what they failed to realize is that some storms don't roar before they hit. They simmer quietly beneath the skin. You didn't disappear. You were in the cocoon, plotting, not for revenge, not for pity, but for transformation. They confused your withdrawal with weakness, your solitude with surrender. That's how shallow minds process depth. They drown in puddles, never imagining you've been swimming with shadows. In oceans they'll never dare to cross. You were building muscle where they thought you were wasting away. You were sharpening your fangs while they gossiped with blunt tongues. They thought they'd seen the last of you, but you were just getting started. See, the world trained you to survive in daylight, but no one taught you how to thrive in darkness. So, you taught yourself. The pain, the betrayal, the abandonment. It wasn't punishment, it was programming. They discarded you like yesterday's echo, hoping you'd rot in irrelevance. But something ancient stirred within you when they turned their backs. Something primal, something unforgiving. The kind of force that doesn't announce its arrival with fireworks, but with silence. Because legends aren't born in applause. They're born in alleys where no one claps, where no one cheers, where you either become something greater or get consumed by the void. And you chose to become. They thought you ghosted because your light dimmed in their eyes. But they never understood. You weren't dimming, you were distilling, purging the noise, the parasites, the leeches, the manipulators. They wanted access to your energy, but never respected the source. They drank from your well, spit in it, then cried when it ran dry. So you stepped back, not because you were weak, but because you were done. Done playing savior, done performing for claps from hands that threw stones in secret. You stopped showing up, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You disconnected, not to vanish, but to recharge the weapon they thought was rusting. Every time they searched your name, expecting ruins, they found silence. And that silence scared them. Because deep down, even the most arrogant coward knows silence is never empty. It means something. And in your case, it meant war was coming. They laughed when you left the spotlight, thinking you couldn't handle the pressure. But they never realized you were the pressure. You left not because you broke, but because the cage they called success wasn't big enough for what you were becoming. You didn't disappear. You were crafting. Every sleepless night, every ignored message, every moment you spent alone, you weren't retreating. You were rehearsing the kind of return that would burn their illusions to ash. They assume the worst. That's what people do when they fear the best in someone. They said you gave up, when in truth, you just stopped giving them access. You stopped handing out explanations to people who were never listening. You stopped setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. You let them think you were dead, because only fools mourn what they don't understand. And they never understood you. They only understood the version of you that made them comfortable, not the version that had hunger in its eyes and fury in its veins, not the version that was too quiet to entertain, too real to fake it, too dangerous to be played. You walked away because staying was killing your spirit. You faded from their radar, not because you were lost, but because you outgrew the frequency they operated on. They play checkers. You were learning chess. They thought you ghosted. But what you really did was upgrade. Not on the surface. No cars, no clothes, no applause. You upgraded your soul, rewired your tolerance, sharpened your instincts. You were in the shadows, all right, but not hiding. You were studying. You were watching who clapped when you bled, who smiled when you fell, who whispered poison in rooms you never entered. And now, you know. You know who deserves the new version of you. You know who fed you lies dressed as comfort. You know who prayed for your collapse in secret while pretending to wish you well in public. You kept receipts, not to expose them, but to remember, to remind yourself what betrayal tastes like, what disrespect feels like, because that's the seasoning in the recipe of a legend. They thought you ghosted, but you were becoming something they can't digest, can't predict, can't kill. You became an echo in the walls of their comfort zone. You became the thought that haunts them at night, the what if they never wanted to face. And the scariest part, you didn't come back louder. You came back calmer. And nothing terrifies fake people more than the calm of the one they tried to bury. Your glow is different now. It's not for attention. It's for annihilation. You don't seek validation. You seek vision. You don't chase seats at tables built on lies. You're building your own throne with wood from the bridges they burned. Your silence wasn't absence. It was alchemy, turning pain into purpose, rage into rhythm, darkness into dominance. And the best part? You're still just beginning. They thought the story was over. But you weren't the chapter. You were the whole book. And while they reread your past, hoping to find weakness, you were already scripting the next volume with ink made of fire. They thought they could replace you, replicate you, rewrite you. But the blueprint is buried too deep in the madness you've mastered. You don't just walk into rooms anymore. You shift the gravity when you enter. You don't just exist, you haunt. You don't just rise, you redefine. And when they finally see you again, when your name resurfaces not as a whisper, but as a warning, they'll realize they never had a clue what was coming. Because you didn't ghost. You ascended in silence, in shadows, in strategy. And now the air tastes different because a legend is walking back into the world, not to be seen, but to be felt. They don't realize what they have summoned. Not yet, but they will. Because when you rise from the dark, you don't return as the same creature they once toyed with. You rise as something untamed, something forged in shadows, something they can't unsee once they've witnessed it. The silence they once mocked now rings like a siren in their ears, because your name is returning with weight. It's no longer just an identity, it's a warning label. You don't knock on doors anymore. You tear down the walls. You don't send signals, they just feel you approaching, like a chill crawling up the spine of every coward who tried to erase you. Now they watch, with trembling eyes, pretending to clap, hoping you don't recognize their fingerprints on the blade that tried to gut you. They smile with cracked masks, terrified of what you remember, because they know. Oh, they know. They know you were listening when they lied, watching when they betrayed, observing when they celebrated your silence like it was your funeral. But it wasn't your funeral. It was your awakening. And now, you're not coming back to prove them wrong. You're coming back to prove yourself right, that you were never broken, just becoming. They had the audacity to count you out while you were sharpening your vision. But what they didn't understand is, the ones who vanish aren't always running. Some vanish to rebuild. Some vanish to become legends. You weren't curled up in a corner, weeping. You were learning to breathe in fire, training your soul to walk on glass, mastering pain like an artist learns brushstrokes. You weren't hiding from the world. You were dissecting it, ripping it apart with your bare hands, figuring out where you went soft, where you gave too much, where you let yourself bleed for people who never deserved your blood. That part of you, it's dead. The version that begged to be seen, suffocated trying to fit inside cages built by people with no imagination. That version is buried, and what rose from that grave is not here to blend in. They thought you ghosted because they never understood that legends don't announce their rebirths. They just show up and make the ground shake. You weren't lost. You were in the lab, crafting new rules, ripping out the programming they installed, deleting every script they handed you. You realized no one was coming to save you, and instead of breaking, you built yourself, piece by piece, memory by memory, scar by scar. They played games. You studied patterns. They laughed. You went silent. They moved on. You leveled up. And now you return, not for applause, but for closure. But not the kind of closure where you get explanations or apologies. No, that's not your style anymore. Your closure is watching them choke on their own comfort as you rise in ways they swore you never would. Your closure is the look in their eyes when they realize you didn't need them. You never did. You just thought you did, back when you were blinded by loyalty and poisoned by hope. But hope doesn't survive in the kind of darkness you've endured. Only purpose does. Only clarity. You don't seek revenge, you embody it. Every step you take now is calculated. Every word sharpened. Every breath cold enough to frost their fantasies. You were gone long enough for them to write your obituary. But here you are, rewriting the legend in real time. They thought your silence was the end of your voice, but you were just learning to speak without saying a word. Your presence now screams louder than any explanation ever could. You don't raise your voice, you raise your standard. And that alone is enough to make the room uncomfortable. Because people who wanted you small can't stand the version of you that no longer asks for permission. They don't like that you walk different now, that your eyes don't beg. They warn that your energy doesn't chase, it demands. You used to seek peace with people who profited from your chaos. Now, you build peace by burning bridges they thought you'd never cross without them. They will try to reconnect, of course, suddenly remembering your name, sending messages laced with nostalgia and fake love. But your silence taught you the difference between those who miss your light and those who miss using it. You don't feed the same mouths that bit you. You don't open doors to hands that once slammed them shut. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the discomfort of your absence. You owe them nothing, not a reply, not an update, not even a glance. You gave them access to your world once, and they fumbled it. Now they watch through the glass while you build an empire from the ashes they thought would bury you. They'll call you distant, cold, changed. But let them. Let them label what they can't manipulate. That's all language ever was to them anyway, a tool to control the narrative. But now you write the script. Now you are the narrator. And your story is no longer about survival. It's about domination. Not to hurt, not to impress, but to reclaim every piece of yourself you gave away, trying to be understood by people who only knew how to consume. You were not meant to be digested. You were meant to be witnessed. And now, they'll witness every step you take as a reminder of what happens when they mistake your silence for surrender. You've outgrown their circle, their whispers, their expectations. You're not bitter, you're just focused. Focused on building a legacy so thunderous, it silences even the loudest doubts. The version of you they discarded, that was your seed form. Now you've bloomed into something they can't predict, can't contain, and definitely can't destroy. Your roots grew in darkness. Your strength is unnatural to them. But that's because you're not here to fit in their garden anymore. You're the whole damn forest now. And it's funny. They thought your story was over, that the silence meant the credits were rolling. But what they don't understand is, the credits don't roll at the beginning of the movie. And you're just now picking up speed. Just now unlocking the feral brilliance that only comes from crawling through fire and choosing not to be consumed by it. You didn't ghost. You evolved. You didn't disappear. You ascended. And when they hear your name again, it won't be from your lips. It'll be from the mouths of others, shaken, speechless, stunned. Because you've become the story they never saw coming. The name that echoes when ambition meets precision. The legend that was born not in lights, but in silence, suffering, and separation. And now, as you step further into your power, into your purpose, the shadows behind you aren't chains anymore. They're proof. Proof of what you survived. Proof of what you buried. Proof that the world's most dangerous force is someone who's already died and chosen to come back with eyes wide open. And it doesn't stop here, because now that the darkness has crowned you, now that the silence has stitched your armor, you're not just back, you're ascending, still climbing, still rising. They won't say it out loud, but they feel it, in the shift of energy, in the uneasy silence that follows every mention of your name, in the way their voice cracks when someone asks, whatever happened to them? They thought you ghosted, disappeared like a footnote, faded like a rumor. But now, the legend they tried to erase is rewriting itself into the very foundation of their fears. And there's no undoing it, because what you've become doesn't go away. It lingers, it haunts, it evolves. You've passed the point of return. You no longer belong to the realm of the overlooked and underestimated. You're operating on frequencies they can't even detect, moving through rooms they thought were locked, thriving in spaces they never believed you'd even reach. This isn't just your comeback, it's your coronation. What they failed to understand is that the dark wasn't your prison. It was your proving ground. They assumed you vanished because you were broken, weak, tired. But what they didn't see was the transformation, the shedding, the ripping away of everything fake, shallow, and dependent. You went into exile to evolve, to master your own mind, to confront every demon they hoped would destroy you. And instead, you made those demons your disciples. They serve you now. They sharpen your instincts. They whisper when it's time to strike. You turned your pain into precision, your doubt into discipline, your heartbreak into fuel so potent it scorches the very ground beneath your feet as you rise. And now you walk through fire like it's a red carpet. They still tell each other stories about the old you, the one that waited, hoped, begged to be seen. But that version is long gone, dead by your own hand. You didn't need an apology to bury them. You needed a mirror. And when you looked into it, you didn't just see pain, you saw potential. So you tore away every label, every lie, every leash, and forged yourself into a creature of focus, fire, and fearlessness. The legend you've become doesn't seek validation. It demands respect. Not because you speak louder now, but because the silence around you roars with meaning. You left without warning, and now you return without explanation. That's the real power, isn't it? You don't chase closure. You are the closure. Every breath you take now is a reminder that you weren't erased. You were reborn. And every step forward crushes the narratives they tried to build in your absence. They painted you as a ghost. But ghosts don't grow louder. Ghosts don't dominate. Ghosts don't stand in front of the world with scars like war paint and eyes like warning signs. What you are now isn't even human to them anymore. You've ascended beyond their reach, beyond their comprehension. You've become the myth they fear becoming real. They'll try to study your moves now, copy your cadence, mimic your mindset, trace your blueprint. But what they don't understand is that this wasn't built from imitation. This was built from isolation. This wasn't learned in classrooms or conferences. This was learned in the silence of sleepless nights, the grit of unspoken pain, the discipline of walking alone when the whole world told you to crawl back. They want the rewards without the war. But you earned every inch of this crown. You bled for this silence. You suffered for this strength. You sacrificed comfort, connection, and even your past self just to become something unbreakable. And now, you don't just walk in rooms. You change the temperature. People feel your presence before you even speak. They stand up straighter, pretend they're not watching, but they always do. Because when you vanish and return legendary, you become the standard they all secretly measure themselves against. They call it intimidating. You call it becoming. They call it arrogance. You call it arriving. Let them call it whatever helps them sleep at night, because they'll never again sleep as peacefully as they did when you were silent. Now you speak with execution. You move like prophecy. You exist like a threat they didn't prepare for. And that's the thing. They never expected this. You were the one they counted out. The one they discarded mid-sentence. The one they left behind, assuming you'd never find your way back to the fight. But you didn't come back to fight. You came back to conquer. And not just them, but every version of you that ever flinched, ever doubted, ever bowed your head just to keep the peace. You're not here to make peace anymore. You're here to make history. Because legends don't apologize for the space they take up. They expand, they consume, they rise, until even the sky feels too small. This is not the climax, it's the continuation. Because once you become a legend in the dark, you realize there's no going back to the light that made you shrink. You don't fit in the molds they built for you. You don't dress up for their comfort. You show up as the storm. You arrive like reckoning. You wear your past like armor and your pain like proof. Proof that you survived the collapse they orchestrated. Proof that you used their silence as fuel, their absence as motivation, their doubt as blueprint. You were gone. Yes, but only because legends are never born in comfort. They're born in chaos. And now, as the dust settles, as the world adjusts to your new frequency, you don't seek revenge. You embody it, quietly, coldly, powerfully. You don't look back to see who's watching. You move forward, knowing they can't look away. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because your legacy isn't about being remembered by them. It's about never needing them in the first place. They thought you ghosted. They thought you faded. They thought you ran. But what they missed, what they could never comprehend, is that you were never running away. You were building. You were sharpening. You were writing your own origin story in the language of shadows, silence, and solitude. And now you don't return with a whisper. You return with weight, with presence, with purpose so unshakable that even those who once knew you now feel like strangers in your kingdom. Because you didn't ghost. You grew. You didn't disappear. You descended into the depths, only to rise with something far more terrifying than revenge, self-mastery. And that, right there, that's what makes you a legend. The kind they'll never see coming again. Because they'll never again earn access to your silence, your soul, or your shadow-born crown. You're not the ghost in their story anymore. You're the storm that rewrote the ending.